I am of old and young, of the foolish as much as the wise. Regard less of others, ever regardful of others. Maternal as well as paternal, a child as well as a man. Stuffed with the stuff that is coarse, and stuffed with the stuff that is fine. One of the nation of many nations, the smallest and the largest the same.
This celebration of American diversity was written by Walt Whitman in 1855. New Jersey in the 19th century needed workers to build its canals, railroads, factories, and cities. They came by the hundred thousands, first from Germany and Ireland, and later from Eastern and Southern Europe. New Jersey was becoming a state of many nations. New Jersey had been ethnically diverse since colonial days. First came the Dutch, Swedes, and Finns, followed by the English and Scots, all before 1700. The colonial wilderness needed every talent, and liberal early charters welcomed foreigners. The first wave of 19th century immigrants came from Germany and Ireland. The Germans who arrived in New Jersey in the 1840s and 1850s were generally well-educated, restless people. Hoboken, Jersey City, and Newark kept the flavor of the fatherland. They had German-language newspapers, beer gardens, brass bands and orchestras, singing societies, gymnastic clubs called Turnvereins, and a love of Sunday games and picnics. The Germans were scorned, mainly because their language, their stubborn belief in the freedom of the spirit, and their Sunday pleasure branded them unmistakably as foreigners. On a Sunday afternoon in 1851, a group of German immigrants traveled across the Hudson River from New York City to Hoboken to celebrate a day in the country. A New York Herald Tribune reporter described what happened.
Here, under the trees, stands for the sale of beer and refreshments were erected. Everything passed off peaceably till toward the close of the afternoon, when some difficulties occurred through the presence of a gang of rowdies known by the title of the Short Boys. They evidently came for the purpose of assault, as they commenced without provocation to insult the females and throw the refreshment tables and destroy the property of the vendors. A regular fight commenced. The rowdies were armed with guns, pistols, swords, clubs, and slingshots, and after the first attack, the Germans entered the German beer houses in the neighborhood and armed themselves. 2 are known to be killed.
The expanding German population drank both beer and wine. Several German-run breweries arose before 1852 to satisfy Teutonic palates. The air was heavy, with a sweet smell of fermenting malt. In reaction to this growing foreign presence, temperance became an ever-burning issue. Clergymen preached frequently on the evils of drink, and laymen organized societies dedicated to abstinence. The Irish were the other foreign group targeted by the temperance reformers. Repeated failures of potato crops in Ireland between 1845 and 1848 made American horizons beckon brightly. Many of those Irish men and women reached Jersey City between 1845 and 1880 and never went much farther. The city wanted them to build railroad yards and dock facilities, to work in the new steelworks and tobacco plants, and to become domestic servants.
Jersey City had, on a smaller scale, all the problems of the great city across the river, without its material prosperity, and before 1836, without a police force or a jail. Besides commercial travelers, a large number of itinerant laborers passed through the city as the Morris Canal dug through to its Jersey City outlet in 1836. Scarce workers were recruited by the thousands, and the canal's agents scoured Ireland for more. The men were housed by the company, their wages paid half in whiskey. Most of them lived in shanties along the canal route, and on payday, they descended ferociously on the local saloons. The temperance movement dominated village social life in the 1840s, and at its height, provided some sense of community to the infant city. Beginning with societies attached to specific churches, the movement was energized by working-class laypeople who took it out of the province of the clergy and into the political arena. This early phase of the temperance movement in Jersey City was led largely by Protestant evangelicals, supported by the clergy. Like other reform movements of the 19th century, it was rooted in the belief that the chaotic conditions of the growing city could be corrected by the strenuous effort of people to uplift and improve themselves. Discouraged by the lack of progress in teaching drinkers to be temperate, some reformers began to focus on the total elimination of the demon rum itself.
Bitter feelings against immigrants was spearheaded in the 1850s by the American or Know-Nothing Party, a movement directed against the so-called German infidels, the Irish Catholics, and all other foreigners. This was a time of bitter anti-foreign and anti-Catholic feeling, led by militant Protestant groups. Followers of the American Party urged the use of the Bible in the public schools and demanded more stringent naturalization laws.
Native-born Protestants, who constituted the elite of Jersey City, dreaded the prospect of a city dominated by Catholic immigrants. Defining themselves in terms of the values and mores of American Protestantism, with its nearly pathological horror of Romanism, native-born citizens worked to defend a way of life that an alien presence was rapidly undermining.
In Jersey City, as in America generally, native-born citizens worked to change the Irish, to make them temperate, respectful of the Sabbath, and if possible, even Protestant.
The American Party attracted perhaps as many as half of Jersey City's native-born voters in 1856, a strong expression of nativist sentiment. The Bible and Tract Societies aimed, as did the Know-Nothing Party, at preserving America as an evangelical Protestant country. One worked to limit immigration, the other to change the beliefs of those already arrived.
The Bible and Tract Societies also had close ties with the city's school system. It is no exaggeration to view the public schools as an extension of the Protestant community.
There was little distinction between the public and private sector in the early 19th century town. Education and religion were institutions essential to the community welfare and therefore supported by public land or taxes. The majority of people received education first from church-related schools. For simple literacy, there were Sunday schools, which used the Bible as a textbook. These were often forerunners of the common school, run for children of the poor, and intended to impart moral lessons, rules of behavior based on the Bible. Middle-class parents who wish to have their children educated for a profession or college might hire a tutor or send their children to an academy which offered the classical curriculum. New Jersey's first attempt to systematize the patchwork of private, charity, and church schools and to wipe out illiteracy was the Common School Act of 1829. Passed largely at the agitation of Presbyterians and other Protestant evangelicals, the act called for the distribution of the Common School Fund, which had been established and gathering interest since 1817, to the trustees of the township common schools. Clearly, the Protestant churches, the Bible and tract societies, the Sunday schools, the public schools, and the temperance movement were all part of one crusade, led by Protestant evangelicals, businessmen, and benevolent volunteers, both men and women. Their aim was to gather the irreligious and the careless and sweep them up into urban institutions like the public school that would mold them into good citizens for the American Commonwealth of God. The Catholic Church and its prelates were justifiably concerned that the children of immigrants growing up in the Protestant city, being daily gathered by Protestant evangelicals into their schools, both weekday and Sunday, would be lost to the church. Many of the textbooks, teachers, and administrators of the schools were openly anti-Catholic. The reading of the Protestant Bible, the singing of hymns, the participation of Catholic children in religious services in the common schools, all were unacceptable to the church. Many thought that the language of the public school laws passed in 1831 and 1838 in New Jersey allowed for the use of public funds to support religious schools. New Jersey's laws reflected the state's colonial tradition of leaving public education, that is, the education of poor children, mainly up to the churches. Even when the common school movement picked up momentum in the first half of the 19th century, many Protestant church leaders thought that religious training could not be left to non-sectarian public schools. In June 1839, the trustees of St. Peter's Catholic Church in Jersey City asked the Common Council for an appropriation of public funds for the support of St. Peter's Primary School. In the decade preceding, the city had casually allowed St. Matthew's Episcopal Church to use the public schoolhouse for its Sunday school and infant school. It might have seemed reasonable to St. Peter's trustees that the city supported educational endeavors in general and the education of the poor in particular. In July, the school committee reported that to grant public money to St. Peter's would be both illegal and unjust. The solution to the problem dividing the community was the building of a school large enough to accommodate all the poor children, who, it might be inferred, were the Catholic children. In February 1847, the council agreed to sell the old schoolhouse and use the proceeds to erect a large school building modeled after Public School 18 on 41st Street in New York City. It relieved the city of the embarrassing question posed by the Catholic demand for a share of the public tax. Jersey City could now point to its new public school number 1 as a free, non-sectarian school serving all classes. The fulfillment of the American democratic ideal. To justify the denial of funds to the Catholic public school, Protestant leaders agreed upon a neutral, non-denominational common school. This did not mean that the public school in Jersey City or any other city was any less Protestant. Protestant clergy regularly attended the public school examinations. The earliest city superintendents were Protestant clergymen. Protestant leaders of the Sunday schools or temperance societies served on the school committee. Protestant prayers and hymns and the Protestant Bible were used. All practices which the Catholics found objectionable proselytizing continued.
The nativism and anti-Catholicism that dominated middle-class Protestant thought before the Civil War remained alive through and after it. While it was no longer the explicit national movement as in the 1850s, nativism at the local level did not end with the advent of war.
Through the 1860s and 1870s, former Know-Nothings played a major role in both the Republican and Democratic parties.
By 1860, immigrants made up slightly over 60% of Jersey City's adult male white population. By far the largest immigrant group, the Irish constituted 60% of all foreign-born. Before the Civil War, the native-born effectively controlled Jersey City's government and institutions. But between 1860 and 1870, the Irish emerged as the single most important political element in the city. By 1869, the Board of Aldermen was 70% immigrant and almost half Irish.
In 1871, the city's Republican elite wrote and passed through the state legislature a charter which radically changed the nature of local government, removing virtually all power from the elected Board of Aldermen. The new city document placed authority in 3 commissions appointed by the state legislature. The charter had the effect of replacing Irish Democrats with native-born Republicans. The charter replaced the city's 16 boards with 6 districts. As many Irish as possible were concentrated in one horseshoe-shaped district, which encompassed swampland shanties at the base of Bergen Hill and the tenements along the Hudson River docks and the Erie Railroad right-of-way. Government by legislative commissions in New Jersey lasted 6 years until 1877. Although the new government succeeded in removing Irish Catholics from positions of influence, it failed in virtually every other respect. Charged with corruption and increasing the city's debt, the commission government lost what little support it had. In 1875, an amendment to the state constitution forbade special legislation, such as the city commission law, that was intended solely for one community.
2 years later, State Senator Leon Abbott from Hudson County, who was later elected governor of New Jersey, sponsored legislation that made every commission appointed for a municipality elective.
Although never mentioning Jersey City, this general legislation applied nowhere else. Jersey City once again became a city with an immigrant government.
By the 1870s, most Americans had accepted the ideal of universal education, but it was not clear how the task of achieving it would be financed. In Jersey City, there were 2 institutions providing free education to the school children: the public schools, founded and led by Protestants, and the parochial schools, founded and led by Catholics. After the Civil War, the state passed a series of laws strengthening its authority over the public schools and assuming a major role in financing public education. These laws were passed with bipartisan political support and included the stipulation that no public funds would be given to religious schools. There was apparently a general acceptance of the state educational system. The only organized opposition came from the Catholic Church. In 1873, Democratic Governor Joel Parker called for a revision of New Jersey's Constitution to bring it in line with the federal Constitution following the Civil War amendments. The rural, Republican-dominated legislators were loath to call a constitutional convention of delegates who might change a system of representation which kept them in power. The legislature finally agreed to a method of revision whereby a commission appointed by the governor would make recommendations for amendments to the New Jersey state constitution. These amendments would have to be approved by 2 successive legislatures before being submitted to the voters for approval. The 14-member commission was composed of prominent jurists, legislators, and public officials, all of whom were Protestant. One of the aims of the commissioners was to ensure the constitutionality of the post-Civil War legislation, which had mandated state support of public schools and had forbidden the use of public funds by sectarian interests. Catholics had repeatedly raised constitutional objections to such laws, and the commissioners seized their opportunity to put to rest, finally, this divisive issue. The 1874 legislature approved several amendments to the state constitution. One of them banned the kind of special legislation that was used by the state to take over the Jersey City municipal government. Another guaranteed a thorough and efficient system of free public schools for the instruction of all the children in this state between the ages of 5 and 18 years. Religion in politics was a charge made by both sides in the brief but bitter campaign over the amendments. And indeed, it was difficult to separate the two. Some Protestants would trade Republican political control of the city for future control over public schools. Some Catholics, to defeat any of the amendments, felt compelled to campaign against all of them, including the one which would restore Catholics to power in Jersey City. For Jersey City Catholics, the price of winning back their city was the Protestant state monopoly of public education. In a turnout that was much larger than anyone had expected, the entire ballot of amendments was approved by a ratio of 5-to-1. Most observers agreed that the overwhelming ratification was the result of a backlash against the organized Catholic agitation against the amendments. The idea of a Roman Catholic prelate instructing voters on a political issue confirmed, for most Protestants, the un-American character of the Roman Catholic Church. The public school cause was again a rallying point for Protestant Americans who would close ranks against the Catholic threat. The ratification of the amendments had national repercussions. Before the month was out, President Grant, using the New Jersey referendum as a barometer, called for the exclusion of all religiously controlled schools from access to public tax money. In the nick of time, Protestants had preserved their public school system by placing it under the control of the state. The city government would soon fall into the hands of immigrants and their children, but the public school system was still under control of Protestants. The most important effect, therefore, of the system of financial support as it developed in the late 19th century was to perpetuate the dual-track system of public education in the immigrant city.
The Germans and the Irish were the first of many groups to immigrate to New Jersey in the 19th century. Each new group had to face the same questions about whether it would fit into an America defined by those who were already here. And the schools continue to be on the front lines of the Americanization process, even to the present day.